Thanks for having me today. Hello, everybody. I'd like to tell you three things today, really. The first thing is going to be a little bit about Bob, tell you what that is, what it stands for, what it's all about, share some stories from people that we've been working with and the reason behind Bob, the process that we've used to kind of capture the human factors behind the technology that we're creating, and then right at the end I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of some of the screens just so you can get a better idea and flavour of what Bob is all about. Okay, so the first thing to say is, what is Bob? So Bob is a solution which we've developed. It's a technical platform that ultimately speeds up the adoption of any kind of innovation, whether that be a medicine, a technology, a device, into the hands of people in the NHS. So it's that speeding up of the process, and how we're going to do that is by allowing people to create instructional case studies. So that'll be directly from the NHS, and there'll be a self-serve model for people in the NHS to do that, and that's going to be free of charge for them to do. And the other people will be commercial providers, so people that have helped put an innovation into the system with working alongside the NHS, and they'll be paying to do that. Ultimately, the idea is that it speeds up the time it takes for someone to pick up an idea, prove an idea with experience, and adopt it into their own setting. So that's the idea, and I'll tell you more about Bob in a moment, but what I wanted to do is share a couple of stories that we've been collecting along the way, and actually some of the reasons, I think they show very clearly some of the reasons behind why we're doing Bob. So the first one is actually a story we collected from someone who we've been working with to actually help assist us. It's actually a behavioural scientist, but actually she works in the NHS as well, and this is a story that she shared with us. So she's a quality improver in the NHS, and she's one of the projects that she worked on was in a maternity ward, and they were dealing with a situation which happens reasonably regularly, and that was avoidable deaths. And in this case, it was babies having problems with heart rates that weren't detected until too late, and so there was a complication around birth. In these situations, it was flagged up, and it was basically put out there. They were asked for help, really. How do we solve the situation? How do we improve this? And so she went in there, and the whole purpose of quality improvement is to go there, look at the problem, work through a process, keep iterating, keep trying things, keep testing, and see what works. So that's exactly what she did. She went in there and she observed how people were taking the heart rate of the baby from the mother, which I don't know how many of you have seen pregnancy, been involved in birth and seen that, but it's quite a clunky device that doesn't stay in the right position very easily. It's a real pain. Or you can use a horn and listen to the baby's heart rate. So either way, it's quite hard to do. But what they realised, the problem was that an individual midwife was doing this by themselves, and so they it wasn't quite going on properly. They weren't getting the longitudinal data to see that the heart rate was actually dropping down and down and down, or they just didn't really know how to interpret it correctly. They weren't sure how to interpret it. So the solution was, well, actually, we need more than one pair of eyes on this, which sounds very simple when you say it like that, but actually, it wasn't that simple. So there were some interventions she put in place there to alleviate that, and one of them was to put a sign on the door when someone was looking at heart rates to say, actually, I'm not quite sure. And I think the sign just said second pair of eyes or something like that. So it was very easy to understand. Someone could just go in the room, have a look, and check. And that carried on going. And actually, that was implemented in that hospital and massively reduced the complications that they had seen. The issue was, for this lady, was that actually, while she was there, it was ingrained in the system. Nothing was written up. And after a period of time, it lapsed, some things got lost, and it just didn't quite work the way it should have done. And so all that good work was pretty much lost. And so people couldn't replicate it in their own locality. All that good work was gone. And the way she described it to us was that she has these massive regrets about this. If only she had captured it in some way, shape or form. Maybe it might still be in place there, but also maybe someone else could use that information themselves. And the other example she gave us, which isn't related to this, was at the same hospital looking at a falls prevention program. And same kind of thing, quality improvement methodology, reduced the falls by 67%. Again, similar thing happened. She went away, the team fragmented, nothing was captured, and that slowly got back up to the national average again. So that was really powerful for us. That said something. Like, these experiences are being lost. These stories are being lost and not passed on. And what that means is that patients' lives are at risk. And also there's a massive cost as well to this. Inefficiency is rife. So that was one. And the second example we heard was from a lady who had previously, she's a pharmacy technician, and she had previously worked in a medicines optimization capacity. And she was asked by NHS England to go into a particular hospital and work on a biosimilar switch. So moving from the standard through the originator molecule through to the biosimilar. And basically all she was told was, we want you to reduce the cost by £400,000. That was it. That was the ask. So she went in there. She had some complications in doing it because the originator had 2 indications. The switch only had 1, so they had to make sure they separated the patients correctly and got the right drugs to the right people. She ended up reorganising the whole stock control. There was a load of education that took place around materials for the patients, materials for the healthcare professionals, and a number of other things. She worked that through with very little support really from NHS England. They told her, this is what you want to do it however you want to do it, just get us these savings. So that was the original challenge, was do this over 4 months, save £400,000 over 4 months. Over 12 months, she ended up saving 1.7 million in that 12-month period. And actually, she's been back there since, and over, I think it's something like maybe 20 months. It's now gone up to £7.1 million in savings from this switch. The thing that stuck with us was that she reported that back to NHS England. We've got these savings, here it is. But that was it. There was no requirement on her to share those learnings with others, to say, well, actually, I can write this up. We can show other people how to do this so they can do this in a shorter period of time. That didn't happen. And she was really, really keen to do this. She was really passionate. She wanted to tell her story, but ultimately, there was no place for her to tell her story. And that really is kind of the genesis of why we've created Bob. It's for people to tell their stories in the right way. So we know that there are thousands of these kind of change projects that take place across the NHS every day, every few months. And sometimes they go really well. You get those kind of savings. Other times, not so great, but actually, you've still learnt a hell of a lot. And the key thing that we've seen is that people are not able to share these experiences with others, and there's just no place to do this. I'd say there's no place. There are some places to do it, but for the vast majority of projects and the vast majority of people, they're not going to get published in a peer-reviewed journal, nor do they want to do that. They might submit for an award somewhere. They may or may not get it. They might not have a clue that you can even do these things. So our idea is to really open it up and allow everyone at scale to be able to share their proven experiences. So just want to quickly talk about why some of these things are challenging in practice, and some might be pretty obvious. Busyness is the first one. Clearly everyone working in the NHS is busy, and the last thing you want to do after working on these projects is maybe sit down there and think, oh, I've got to write something up now, or I've got to capture something. It's a challenge. But people haven't really looked at what those incentives to share are. What are those drivers to share? So that's something we're doing. The other piece is there is information out there if you go looking for it. So when people start projects, you can find some information out there, but it tends to be in silos, or it's impossible to find, or when you find it, what we found is that it's kind of what we call the 6-point bullet summary. It's like, what was the challenge, what was your solution, and were there any learnings? If you're lucky, you get the learnings. But generally, that's it. There's no how-to. There's no recipe book for, I did this, I went to a finance meeting with this person. Actually, it was really challenging because I didn't bring X, Y, and Z with me, and if I had, you get the idea. There's no narrative of that change. And people describe this as implementable insights, or adoptable nuggets, or what's the rabbit hole you've got to watch out for, and the list goes on. They've all got these things. And normally what happens is if you're embarking upon a project, you go out there, you're lucky enough you go to a conference where someone happens to be talking about a project that you're interested in. You can collar them afterwards and get some insight from them, or you can arrange a coffee catch up or whatever it is. But that's where you get the good stuff. You don't get the good stuff from reading about their minimal case study. So what we want to try and do is replicate those conversations in the form of some kind of narrative that someone can learn from.
To counteract some of the noise.
Okay. Is that okay? Excellent. Okay, so yeah, and the last thing to say is that this is not the case for all of the platforms that exist, but for a large chunk of them, it's just a really awful user experience. So even if you know there's information there, just getting it is just hard. So we're looking to address these things, but looking to address these things through the lens of actual human beings, because ultimately they're the people that make the change. Anything that gets adopted into a system, whether it be a technology, a medicine, humans have still got to touch it and use it and implement it. So they're still the most important part of this. So though we're building a tech product, it's got to be something that ties into what someone actually wants to use it for. What's their needs, their wants. So what I wanted to quickly talk to you about, and you may well know all of this already, but for me and Neil, it was quite enlightening going through this process of building a product from scratch and trying to consider what's the best way of doing it, because we all know this stat, and you can extrapolate this to startups. The vast majority fail, and they fail for a number of different reasons, but a couple of the key reasons why they fail is because just not fully understanding the customer's voice. What are they trying to do? What's the actual need? And also the assumptions that people make they could be captured, but they're never really tested. You never really look back at them throughout the process. So what ends up being, you end up building this enormous product based upon sometimes a bit of a hunch, but you end up spending loads of money putting it out there and then wondering why no one's there using it. So we've had some good advisors working with us, and so we were told from the very beginning, make sure that you consider the user and really get to know what they're about. And you may well have seen this quote before, but it works perfectly for us, because at the end of the day, if you ask someone, what they really need, you're not always going to get the answer. You have to observe how they work in the real world, and you have to look at what they're trying to achieve. What are their jobs to be done? I don't know if anyone's familiar with that term, jobs to be done. It was coined by a chap. I've got to look up his name now. It's terrible because I've completely forgotten. Well, Ted Levitt came up with the idea here, but then actually and also the idea of the jobs to be done framework. All that basically says is you should be looking at and focusing on what users want to get done. What's the purpose of them doing it? And that's why they want to use your products and services. It shouldn't be about, you're trying to market them something, you've got your business idea and you want to push it to them. It's what do they need? What's their most painful problem? Because if it's a painful problem for them and the consequences of that problem are really, really, really bad, losing your job, not getting a bonus, not getting a pay rise, even worse, killing people, then if you can focus on those things and work out what they are, then that's really what you should be building your product around, those things. If you can solve those problems, that's what you should be doing. And so there's another chap called Tony Ulwick, that was the name I couldn't remember. He's written a book on jobs to be done, and there's a load of people that are proponents for this idea of working. All it basically means is you should go and speak to people that would be your customers. It sounds quite obvious, but so many people don't do that. So what I want to just show you is a little process that we went through to do that. So this is the full journey that we've been on, and we're now in development of our product. We're looking to launch our product early next year. I'm not going to talk you through all of this, but what I wanted to focus on was the value proposition design element, and just how we worked it, what we learnt from the experience, and how it's informed what we're now doing differently in our product. So the first thing I should say actually is, when we talk about customers, before we started using some kind of rigor and some kind of process, it was literally picking up the phone to people, going to meet them, and having the most biased one-way leading conversations ever known. Nid and I had an idea of what the product looked like, and so we completely and utterly biased every conversation, asking them, would you basically use this, which isn't really the way of doing it. And they all said yes, absolutely. So not having a solution in mind is always the idea, but it's hard to do that. So we worked with a behavioural scientist to help us create a semi-structured interview template so that we could, to some degree, remove some of the biases that we had, and also ensure some kind of consistency with the way we were conducting these interviews. I'm sure you guys have done some of this before. So the first step for us was identifying the right kind of customers to speak to. And so we're talking to people in the NHS that are making change, and that could be anyone. Everyone really could make change in the NHS, but we had to target that down to people that we felt really were struggling, and there were challenges that they faced in terms of doing their job. So we initially started to look at quality improvers, so QI professionals, and people working in medicines optimization. And the reason why we chose those two groups of people initially was because they were handling big, meaty, challenging projects, and the kind of resources they have were limited. They also tried their best to learn from other people. They wanted to be the best, they wanted to use evidence, but sometimes it was just really hard. And so there were a number of challenges they faced. They also had massive time pressures, morale's low, and they're seen as these people that they don't get much of the kudos really when things go well, and they do a lot of the hard work to implement medicines, and sometimes they're kind of blamed, the managers and so on. So we felt like it was an interesting area to probe into because we felt they had a lot of interesting things that we could learn from. So we started there, and we used this jobs to be done framework, which basically asks, what are the key things that you do? What do you need to do? What do you want to do in your daily working life? And then also something called COM-B, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with COM-B. Yeah. Okay. Which is basically a behavioural change model. I'm not going to talk to you about that now, but it's another way of looking at why people make certain decisions, or why people could make certain decisions, why they would do something differently. And it works on looking at the capabilities of making a change, the opportunities and the motivations. And that's all I'll say about it now. But it's very interesting, and you should definitely look into it. So we had this behavioural scientist help us develop these questions, and then we went off and did that. So most of the time they were virtual, and we did some face-to-face, but we learned a hell of a lot about what was the real problem out there. And again, through the initial bias conversations we had, we realised that yes, we were being ridiculously biased, and actually there was quite a lot that we could learn. So the thing for us was about trying to be as neutral as possible and just observe what was said, because sometimes people weren't volunteering the information. It was almost by the lack of what they said that gave us the insight as well in some cases. So it was interesting, and we've conducted something like over 60 customer interviews to date across those groups, and we're continuing to do that, which is the other thing we've learned, is that never stops. So always continuing to learn and try to extract those things and use them in our process. So this next piece is something which our advisors provided to us, and we found this quite useful because at the moment what we were doing is we were having these interviews, and I was literally collecting a bunch of notes. Didn't have a clue what we were doing with that stuff. There was no structure to it. So what we've got here is a means of capturing it in some kind of structured form. And I don't expect you to read that. I'll quickly walk you through it. But this is I'm working with an advisor called Matt Mower, and this is his template that he uses with us, and it basically helps you structure the learnings you have from each of your customers and enables you to look at them and to try and find the truth in what's being said, so you can make use of that. So you've got 6 different domains here. Some of it's pretty straightforward. What do we know about the customer? So that's who they are, where they work, how long have they worked there, what responsibilities they have, and so on. Then this is the key part, which relates to this jobs to be done component. So what does the customer need and want? And this has been split up into 3 different sections. So the first thing is, what does the customer want to do? And this is very functional. This is just, what do they do on a daily basis? Do they need to create reports? Do they need to, can't think, number of things, functional things. And then you've got the middle component, which is to feel. So this is the emotional part. So do they want to feel like they're doing a good job? Do they want to feel valued? Those kind of components. And then you've got to appear, and this is the social component. So do they want to appear to be the most knowledgeable person in the organisation, and so on. And those are that's where it gets very interesting. Separating and teasing apart those components is very, very interesting. Then we get to the frictions. So these are the things that stop you doing your jobs. And that could be, we've got no money, we've got no time, there's this governance that gets in the way, whatever it is, that goes there. And then you've got the negative consequences that you just want to avoid, and that's really powerful, and they're closely linked to obviously what you want to do, but these are things like losing your job, killing people, very serious consequences. Outcomes are the things that will please you, and they are directly related to the jobs. So you've done your report, brilliant, you did your report, maybe you saved some money, whatever it is. It's very functional, transactional outcomes, but the benefits are, well, great, but how did that make you feel? What was the experience to you? And those are the things that kind of get more to the individual and the personal drivers, and that's really what's very interesting to us. So just as an example, hopefully you're with me so far, but as an example, I'll just tell you how we've used this. And this is a bit of a crude example, but for us, this is the way we would have worked through this. So in the first column, we've got, as a customer that works in medicines optimization with a CCG, I need to capture my experiences and learnings because it's needed for my revalidation, CPD, or it helps me justify my next career move. So that's the benefit. And if I don't get the recognition I deserve, I may not meet my CPD goal, or require additional evidence, or I get passed over for the promotion, which is the consequence. But capturing the evidence I need to support CPD or appraisal is hard because there isn't a place where I can capture my most relevant projects' experiences easily, and that's the friction. And I would like something that simplifies the process so it doesn't take as long to do, and that's the outcome. So it sounds quite straightforward there when you talk it through, and that really is actually, but once you've got enough of a bank of these interviews, it kind of makes sense, and you start to see patterns emerging, and also the assumptions that we've made throughout the process. And that's really where we found it most useful, is to really keep a check on ourselves and the assumptions that we've made, which we all do at all times. And so we do that, and then what we've done is we've then shown this back to our customers and said, right, we've made these assumptions, we've drawn this all up, this is what you said to us, does this feel right? And we've also prioritised and got them to rank all of these as well. And we've actually used a tool called Go Sort It, which is pretty good. If you ever need to do any kind of ranking, I recommend using this as a tool. It's pretty good. Just asks you comparison questions and you can rank a list. It's pretty good. So we do that, and then at the end of that process, we've got a reasonably good idea about how the customer thinks, feels about what they're doing on a daily basis. And what we then look to do is look to convert these into requirements for our product. Because what we're never going to do is we're not going to say it's this feature based on what this one person said. What we now need to do is we need to group all these together and look for the requirements. So this is the tool we've used to do that. Again, it's another mapped MOA document that we've got here. And just quickly, just looking from left to right. So the way we fill it out is we look at the pain gain statement. So, and that comes from the previous document that we've created. The impact, what is the current solution if there is one? What's the value to the customer? And then ultimately, what is the requirement? What does it need to do? And what we're looking for here is overlaps. What we ultimately want is we want one requirement which serves loads of needs and loads of wants, so that we are pretty confident that it's something that if we build that requirement, we've solved that big problem for them. And so that's what we're trying to do throughout this whole process. So just looking back at the previous example and how that might look in this format, it would be, so the pain gain statement would be something like, as a customer that works in medicines optimization within a CCG, I find capturing my experiences and learnings hard because I'm not sure what to capture. The process can be hard and it takes a long time. Fine. Impact is then, because if I don't get to capture my experiences, I won't get the recognition I deserve, feel less likely to get promoted or achieve my CPD goals. Okay. And then the current solution, well, at the moment it's various. So people do sometimes write up a little bit of their work. It could be in awards, it could be in posters, but it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And the value is, if I captured my experiences or learnings, I would be recognised, and it would also help my CPD and career progression. So the product requirement then is, it must simplify the process of capturing learnings and experiences. I mean, it sounds very crude and I'm making it simple, but so at the end of it, we have this requirement which directly links all the way back to what the problem was in the first place. And so that's what we've used to give us a long list of these requirements. And then what we're doing is we're then looking at something called an impact map. Is anyone familiar with impact maps? No? Okay. Impact maps it's basically a big mind map, really, but why it's great is you've probably heard of development roadmaps. You know what they are. So this kind of replaces the need for a development roadmap, which is basically, instead of looking at how your product evolves from a technical perspective, this looks at how your business evolves. So it includes everything. And what it's doing is it's looking back to your original goal. Why are you doing that? So for us, our goal is to save the lives of 65 million people, or to touch 65 million people, not save lives, to touch 65 million people, and also to save the NHS £1 billion over the next 5 years. So very large goals, so that would be our goal there. And then what we end up doing through the process that we've been through, we've mapped all these possible requirements, these possible things we want to do, and we'd end up having those here as deliverables, but they would be alongside other things that are not technical items as well. And every single one of these deliverables has a metric assigned to it. So when we go through this, and the reason why this is useful is when we go through this, we can then do these small experiments and we can test and we can see whether things are actually having the effect that they should be having. And so that we can kill certain things straight away and save the money. Because, as a startup, you only have a finite pot. So the purpose of the impact map is to make us be laser focused about the areas we should be looking at in terms of development, but also in the business. So that's the process that we've been going on to really try and make sure that we've been using customer insights throughout. And it's been a challenge because it sometimes feels a little unnatural to go back, but it feels good now because what we come out of it is this rich amount of insight, and now also a long list of assumptions that we've made about the product that we're looking to build. But it's been an interesting process to go through, and I definitely recommend, if anyone's building something, to just check out the Jobs to be Done framework, look at that. It's definitely worthwhile as a process to go through. We found it really useful. So I've got, how much time have I got time left?
A few minutes.
Okay, excellent, good. So what I thought I would do with the remaining time is just to walk you through Bob. And we've got a few screens here. It's in development at the moment, but we've just taken a few screens off just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So you can see it come to life. So this is just a little story. This is John. Let's say John's a commissioner. And John has just got an email from his friend Frank Bishop. Now Frank and John know each other, and they were recently chatting at a networking event, and Frank mentioned to John that he had seen some good evidence on how this particular piece of NICE guidance, TA342, had been used in a centre, how they had implemented it. So Frank knew that John was going to be doing something similar, so he's forwarded him this email to take a look at a case study that covers this experience. So John opens up the email, goes through to the website, and he's presented with an executive summary of this case study. Now, what he's seeing here is the key headlines, really. So what were the quality improvements? What were the major changes to the service? And what do the savings look like now and in the future? So he's interested. He knows he's got to embark upon this project. It's in the pipeline. He's got to look at it. The guidance has come out. He's got to do something about it. So he has a look. So he clicks. He's prompted to join or log on, and he's then presented with the full case study. So as I alluded to earlier, the key thing that we're looking to do is we're trying to create narrative. It's about the story of the change. It's not just about the facts and the evidence and the business case. They're all important and they're all relevant. But what we believe is that actually the thread that runs through it is the narrative. That's what people want to see. So you definitely can't read that, or maybe you can, I don't know. But ultimately, it's trying to use less business speak, less academic language. It's just, what did you do? And so I'll just read you one part of it that hopefully brings that to life. So what we were saying here is, so we included patient experience by holding a patient engagement event, half-day meeting with 6 patients with either UC or CD. Patients were invited to discuss their experiences of the IBD pathway. This allowed direct conversations with patients, which really helped, as we rarely get the chance to discuss the impact of diseases with patients themselves. It was hosted in a meeting room at the local university hospital, and it goes on. So the kind of things that would be shared. It could be an actual agenda for the meeting, where it was hosted, practical details that people actually need to embark upon these changes. The other thing you can see in this is that you have a link to the actual guidance that's being referenced. And also, no one makes a change by themselves. So there's the ability to share this with your team that are making the change as well. And they get the same email that John got from Frank inviting them to join. So John's reading, he's interested in what he's seeing. And he's definitely going to use parts of this for his project that he's embarking upon. So he wants to rate the case studies, which he can do. So he's given it 5 stars. But also, one thing we're keen to do is really to create a positive community for this kind of change. It's not just about creating the case studies, it's also the people around that. I spoke about morale, and so showing appreciation and recognition is really, really important with these groups. So John is also able to show appreciation for the author for writing the case study, but also appreciation to Frank for sending it his way too. And he does that, they get emails, they're encouraged, it's positive, they've done the right thing by sharing that. So he's done that, he's going to embark upon his change, but that's not the end of the journey for John. We'll be following up with John to again prompt him if he hasn't given feedback on that particular case study, thank other people for making the change, and also he gets a view of what activity he's had on the site as well. A key component of this is about the user experience and also about driving people to take action as well. So the gamification element is critical here too. So there's a lot of this that's going to be built into the platform too. So there's other elements as well around best case studies on the platform, interviews, other things around that aren't just case studies, aren't just written content, but tips and tricks from other quality improvers on how to make these kind of changes. So John's been hanging around the site for a few weeks now. He's done his project, and actually we've prompted him well enough that he's ready to do a case study himself. So what he's presented with is a series of domains which he can fill in. And the key thing, and this is really the core part of Bob, is it's all about the narrative, and it's all about how we tease that out of people. So we're creating a writing engine which prompts people with the right questions to be asked so that you get the right content back. So to give you a flavour of that, it's a series of open and closed questions. It's in effect an expert system that we ask. So did you factor in the patient experience, yes or no? How did you include the patient experience, and what did you learn that played a part in your recommendation? And then again, you can see the prompt starts there, the narrative starts, I included the patient experience by. So the whole thing is about getting people to write not like robots. In addition to that, there's also a series of prompts that people can use to help guide them in the right direction, because they might not know what's useful for a doctor in that case study. So we'll be telling them what is the important information they need to impart in the case study. They can save it, come back and do it at a later date, share it with others to review, and then the last thing they do is the executive summary and declare their conflicts of interest and so on. As I mentioned, gamifying the platform, there'll be leaderboards that show number of downloads, number of shares and so on. And of course it will be useless if you couldn't search the site. So searching is a key component of this too. So making sure that it's easy to find related content to just look at.
Ignore me.
Okay, no worries. Related content. So if you're looking for a paediatric case study in oncology, but there isn't anything there, then maybe we can serve up a paediatric case in gastroenterology, so that there's some kind of learning that can still be achieved. The other thing to say is that our goal is to have a failed project, a series of failed projects on the site. If we can get that, we know we've got success. And I know it's hard to do, but the conversations we've had with our customers so far is that there is a willingness to do that because they know that that's what helps people learn.
No worries.
That's all right. And so the last thing I'll say is that this is free of charge for the NHS, and our model is going to be working with commercial suppliers to the NHS, and our initial customers we're looking for are pharma companies, responsible pharma companies that already have a medicine that's being used optimally in a locality, and it's bringing those benefits to patients in the NHS. So we're giving them the opportunity to profile those case studies on our platform. They'll be authored by an NHS person, and they will look exactly the same as all the other case studies on the site. And so those pharma case studies will be in a sea of other case studies that the NHS have created themselves using our writing engine, so that the idea is that there is a case study on absolutely anything, and the idea is we remove that barrier for people to create and share, so that it doesn't feel like this scary thing that you can only do when you reach a certain level in your career. And we know that career progression is linked to this. Recognition, kudos, and career progression is going to be critical for the success of this. So that's the driver that we're focusing on. That's what we've heard from our customers. And so giving them the ability to use these case studies in place of CPD, using it for appraisals, using it for other things that they would normally spend time creating, sometimes 20, 40 hours a year. So spend that time, create a Bob case study, and then you don't need to do that. So yeah, come along, be an interesting event. Thank you.